Hey everybody, and welcome to another film log video where I talk about the things that I watched for the first time within the last month. One of those things for July is not Space Jam 2, by the way. There's only so much torture that I'm willing to go through to talk about a topical movie. So now that you know what this is, let's just get right into it. Black Widow. This is the latest movie in the MCU and a highly anticipated one for fans of the series, and even though that's the case, it still kind of had to justify its own existence in a way because, as most of you probably know, she died in Endgame, so we know no matter what where the events of this movie are gonna lead her. Scarlett Johansson does a great job with this character as she has for the past decade now, but honestly, the most entertaining part of this movie was Florence Pugh's character. I think she's a great actress, and I wouldn't mind seeing her show up in more future stuff. My biggest complaint would have to be that the CGI effects in the big final battle look inexcusably bad, considering that this movie was put on the shelf and delayed by the pandemic for over a year. Considering the amount of time they had to work on this after it was already supposedly ready for release, I don't know which is worse, if they just left those bad effects in and didn't do any further work on them, or if they did improve them a little bit and it still looks bad even with the $200 million budget this thing supposedly has. I just got the overall sense that this was a really middle of the road, by the books Marvel movie that doesn't really break any new ground whatsoever. Even if there are intriguing elements in there, they aren't fully doven into. I see that there could have been a much better movie in here if they wanted to go in that direction, but they didn't, and that's a little unfortunate. That being said, I don't think this movie is bad. It's an enjoyable one-time watch in the theater that I don't feel like I'm gonna have any urge to revisit unless I do a MCU marathon at some point in the future. I'd give Black Widow a 6 out of 10. Bronson. Now, considering the next movie I'm going to talk about, this section of the video has a nice little unintentional theme to it. This was directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, who also made the movie Drive. This was more or less the role that put Tom Hardy on the map, and deservedly so because he's fantastic in this. It's also incredibly well presented, and some of the choices are really clever considering the perspective that we're seeing it from. The problem is that the main character doesn't seem to have any progression over the story, which makes for an entertaining performance, but not a very layered one. The second act is also considerably weaker than the beginning and ending of the movie, and I found myself thinking that this just wasn't what I needed to feel any kind of sympathy for this character if that's what it was going for. So yeah, having said that, I would recommend this, but not to people who are easily put off by intense violence, which is something this director is pretty well known for. I'd give Bronson a 7 out of 10. A Clockwork Orange. This is a result of me trying to catch up on the classic Kubrick joints that I haven't seen yet, and this was pretty clearly a source of inspiration for Bronson. I just happened to watch that after watching this. As expected, this movie is immaculately executed because Kubrick was just a complete master of the technical aspects of filmmaking. Would I call this a masterpiece? Not quite. I particularly like the surreal nature of the beginning of the movie and the fact that there was clear attention to detail when it comes to the set and locations. That made it feel a lot more grounded in reality. However, unlike other Kubrick movies I've watched, the narrative didn't have all that much of a personable aspect that would make me want to revisit sometime soon. It also didn't really live up to its reputation of being one of the most disturbing movies ever made, at least not to me. There were definitely some standout moments and scenes that were really hard to watch, but I still went to bed immediately after watching it and didn't have any trouble sleeping or anything like that. That being said, the questions that this movie proposes are really interesting, especially for the time that it came out, and the main character is just a case study in developing empathy for a character that you should just find totally despicable. The clear message of the ending also is pretty haunting, especially considering the 50 years of hindsight that we have since this movie came out.
1 hour later.
So yeah, massively influential and massively acclaimed movie. Even if I'm not as huge on it as some other people are, I'd still recommend it as a must-watch for any movie fan. If not only to realize the irony of having the gang characters from this movie be in the background of Space Jam 2, which is allegedly a kid's movie. Alright, little Timmy, who was your favorite background character in that movie?
The psychopathic serial rapist.
Good on paper. I'm gonna do my best to avoid the really easy joke that title offers. This was just a random watch while me and my wife were relaxing on the weekend, and there isn't really much to say about it because it just simply falls to a lot of the issues that I have with modern comedies. The idea for the story is, but the writing has a complete and utter lack of subtlety that really just got annoying after a while, because every new development has to be spoken out loud just to make sure you got it, not shown, told. And most of the jokes are clearly just things that the writers think are funny, and it doesn't matter if a character has to jam it into a conversation in a way that is completely unnatural and not something that a real human being would do. It's getting in there. I don't care what the context is, it just needs to be in there. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The best comedies don't just have the characters crack jokes all the time. Their characters are what's funny, and seeing their interactions become humorous because it fits their character is what makes a really good comedy. And way too many movies nowadays don't do that. The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard. I saw a review of this that more or less summed up my feelings in one sentence. It said something along the lines of, "This movie is every bit as messy as its title." Couldn't have said it better myself.
2 hours later.
This is one of those movies that has nothing to offer, so it just throws so much at you that you as the viewer don't have time for your brain to process what you just saw before the next plot development happens. Not to mention that any new bits of information are just regurgitated in the most bland way possible. As far as the acting, Ryan Reynolds was indistinguishable from any other character he's ever played. Sam Jackson was playing a cartoon version of himself, and Salma Hayek was just obnoxious. I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 10 simply because it was mercifully short. If this movie was 2 hours or longer, I would have legitimately been in a bad mood after watching it. Life Itself. This is a documentary covering the life and career of world-renowned film critic and writer Roger Ebert. Obviously, as someone who's reviewing movies right now, this was a little more insightful to me personally, and I think that anyone who does this and takes it seriously draws some kind of inspiration from Roger Ebert, either consciously or subconsciously. With this movie, it was really interesting to see what led him to his process and the near universal appeal that he had, as well as his relationship with Gene Siskel.
3 hours later.
Can you move it along? I'm all out of time cards.
There really isn't anything to complain about here, outside of the fact that it felt like they lingered on a couple subjects just a little too long, but I'd recommend this to most everybody, especially people who are film lovers like me. 8 out of 10. Trust. Mark this as another random blind watch, but the best thing I can say about this movie is that the premise has potential if it was approached differently. I could see this same story being made into a really good dark comedy, but as is, this just felt like the most boring and by-the-books way you could have possibly told this story. The flashbacks also made everything weirdly telegraphed. Like, after a certain one, I realized what the twist was going to be, like, immediately, but it still took 20 minutes to get there. The whole time I was just thinking, just get on with it. Even if it was just in chronological order, I think this would have been more interesting. Still not great, but more interesting. 3 out of 10 for wasted potential. The Wrestler. I had heard a lot of great things about this movie, and slightly before I finally decided to watch it, I learned that it was a Darren Aronofsky movie, who I just love as a director, so I was just like, alright, that's going to the top of my watch list now. And yeah, this movie is just awesome. It's already been said a lot, but Mickey Rourke is just perfect for this role. This is the role that he was born to play, and he deservedly got an Oscar nomination for this. But someone who's just as important to the theme of this movie is Marissa Tomei's character. She plays a stripper who's more or less his only real friend. The reason she's so important is that through her it showcases two people who, for very different reasons, are seen as less than desirable because they're aging in a field where their bodies are sensationalized and exploited in a way for entertainment purposes. The only difference is she has a better grip on that happening than he does. You might think that just from reading the synopsis and looking at the poster that this is just a bro movie, but it's themes like this that make it so much more deep than that. I also really love the purpose behind some of the camera work and sound design choices. This movie's just amazing. It's almost a 10, but there's just a little bit holding it back. I'm gonna give it a 9 out of 10. I'd recommend anybody watch it. And that's it for this film log video. Look forward to more stuff from me in the near future. I got a nice little project brewing for you. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more stuff like this. Thank you for watching and have a great day.